Tom surveyed the chaos of his room, a testament to the many times he'd vowed to bring order to it. Every morning, as the first days of sunlight crept in, a pang of guilt would hit him about the state of his surroundings, especially as he scrambled to get ready for work. But as the day's challenges wore him out, he would return each evening, holding tightly to a bottle of whiskey like a lifeline. The amber liquid was his nightly escape, and after emptying it, he'd sink into dreamless slumber, only to wake up and repeat the cycle. Tom's days had become a blurred repetition of the same scenes ever since the void left by Emma. Her decision to move to the city in pursuit of bigger dreams had torn a hole in his world, a void he tried to fill with the numbing embrace of whiskey. Each bottle was a temporary bandage over the wound, a way to forget the deafening silence of the house they once shared. When he first met Emma, Tom was at the fair, amidst the lively hustle and bustle of families enjoying carnival rides and stalls showcasing homemade goods. She was standing in front of a stall that sold handmade candles, her laughter infectious as she chatted animatedly with the sellers. The sun caught her hair, turning it into a halo of golden strands, and her eyes sparkled with a passion he'd never seen before. Without much thought, Tom found himself drawn towards that stall, pretending to be interested in the candles, but in truth, wanting to be closer to the magnetic force that was Emma. The moment she caught sight of Tom, her eyes lit up instantly. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, starting with candles and meandering through shared interests and stories. By the end of the day, they both knew that their encounter wasn't just a fleeting meeting, but the start of something special. Tall, with a chiseled jawline and deep-set eyes, Tom had an air of quiet strength about him. His hair, always tousled just right, gave him a rugged charm that never went unnoticed. It wasn't just his physical appearance that drew people in, though. There was a depth to Tom, a sensitivity that was evident in his thoughtful gaze and the way he listened more than he spoke. His laughter, though rare, was infectious, and his voice had a calming presence that made people feel heard and understood. Working on the vast expanses of Mr. Harrison's farm, Tom had become an indispensable asset. The rich soil yielded bountiful crops year after year, but it was Tom's expertise that ensured the harvesting process was seamless. His innate understanding of machinery was almost uncanny. Tractors, combines, plows, whatever equipment was put before him, Tom could coax it to its maximum efficiency, troubleshooting problems that stumped others. It was as though the gears and levers were extensions of his very limbs. He could hear the slightest off note in an engine's purr and could tell if a machine needed tuning just by the feel of it beneath his hands. He lived a solitary existence. His beloved grandmother, the woman who had nurtured and raised him, had departed from this world just as he reached adulthood at 18. It felt as though she had held on just long enough, ensuring he could stand on his own 2 feet. When he was a child at school, Tom felt a pang of sadness and frustration watching other kids cry for their parents during morning drop-offs. Even though these children knew they'd be reunited in the afternoon, their tears flowed freely every day. Tom never had parents to hold him close before or after school. He never received a clear explanation about why he didn't live with either of them. As he grew older, he came to understand their priorities. His mother valued relationships with man, while his father pursued material possessions and other relationships. To them, these pursuits were more significant than their own son. During his high school years, Tom was known to be a man of few words. He rarely participated in idle chatter, gravitating instead towards the solace found amidst the hum of machinery in his mechanics and construction courses. The school's workshop was his sanctuary, a place where his hands skillfully danced with tools. After high school, Tom's direction in life was unmistakable. While he appreciated the humanities, he felt confident in his ability to grasp them through the pages of books. Given his passion for tactile work, selecting a career path was no quandary. He pursued further education at a community college, honing skills in welding and automotive technology. When he chose to return to his quaint hometown post-college, eyebrows raised in surprise. Most of his contemporaries were lured by the bright lights and promises of the metropolis, but Tom was carved from a different mold. He submerged himself in his work, shunning any distractions, and remained seemingly impervious to romantic overtures. He had a singular vision in mind: to construct a home before even entertaining thoughts of matrimony. The house he crafted stood as a testament to his abilities, robust in its structure yet imbued with warmth. From his earliest memories, Tom was no stranger to the biting sting of cold and struggle. His grandmother, in her frugality, often skimped on firewood, leaving their previous abode perpetually cool. It was a sensation Tom vowed never to experience again. The fateful day Tom first laid eyes on Emma was one imprinted in his memory. Her presence seemed to awaken a dormant part of him, touching corners of his heart he didn't even know existed. As they started dating, Tom found himself enraptured by Emma. Their love blossomed quickly, and it wasn't long before they decided to solidify their bond in matrimony. For Emma, Tom was a breath of fresh air. Beyond the attraction and affection she felt for him, he represented a chance to step away from the overwhelming responsibilities at home. She realized that Tom was a smart guy and could fulfill her dreams of escaping the small town and living life to the fullest. Tom lavished affection and gifts upon Emma, indulging her every whim. Quickly, Emma began to revel in the luxuries. Tom was the ideal partner, always ensuring that her needs were met. She soon began to eschew any household responsibilities with a plethora of excuses, ranging from concerns about damaging her skin to simply not being in the mood. Undeterred, Tom took on every chore, doing all he could to guarantee Emma's comfort and happiness. His love for her was boundless. She was not only the love of his life, but also the only close family he had left. This continued for 3 years. Then one unexpected day, Emma confronted him. "Tom," she began, her voice laden with urgency, "how long are we going to remain trapped here? Everyone's progressing, heading to the bustling cities, while we're languishing in this stagnant village." Caught off guard, Tom replied, "We've never discussed moving to the city. Why this sudden change of heart?" "I can't fathom spending my entire life in this backwater place. I hope you don't intend to anchor me here forever." Tom's brows furrowed in confusion. "You've called this place home your whole life. Did something change? We've got everything we need right here." Emma paced back and forth, her impatience palpable. "Tom, you're starting to sound like an old relic. I want to experience the city's vibrancy, maybe catch a live show at the theater." Their disagreement escalated that day. In a moment of sheer frustration, Tom lashed out, likening her to a princess on a pea, before storming out of the room. Although they made up later, the topic remained untouched. Deep down, Emma had always known that Tom was deeply rooted in this town. Her real intentions for stirring the argument were hidden, and there was a more significant reason behind it. 3 weeks after the argument, Tom trudged home from work to an unsettling silence. Emma was gone, and the only indication of her exit was a letter laid carefully on the dining table. In it, Emma explained that she had met someone else, a person who resonated with her desires and ambitions. She had decided to start a new chapter in the city with him. She coldly acknowledged that she had taken the money Tom had meticulously saved over the years, justifying it as repayment for the prime years she had lost with him. Emma's betrayal set in motion a grim transformation in Tom's life. Initially, he began by liquidating his assets, selling off all his livestock. The once loved house soon started to show signs of neglect, its charm fading away. The townsfolk, at first oblivious, started whispering about Tom's descent. Although he maintained his job, he was constantly on thin ice, reprimanded repeatedly for his alcohol-scented breath. The day his boss finally confronted him about this state, Tom had drowned his sorrows in an entire bottle of whiskey. Surveying his cluttered home, a mixture of grief and exhaustion in his eyes, Tom felt a suffocating need to isolate himself. He made a half-hearted attempts to restore some order. However, every endeavor was met with painful memories. A delicate hairpin which once adorned Emma's hair, or their wedding album filled with once cherished moments. Abandoning the thought of cleaning, Tom stepped outside. The piercing cold nipped at his cheeks, serving as a cruel reminder of his bleak reality. As he struggled to start his old truck, whose battery was on its last leg, he reflected on his next move. Work was no longer a pressing concern. After his most recent no-show, His sympathetic boss had advised him to take some time off, but Tom's agenda was clear. He was driving to the nearest liquor store. The numbing embrace of alcohol seemed like the only refuge he had left. Tom struggled with the truck's hood, attempting to remove the battery when Mrs. Carey, his neighbor from across the street, approached him. "Batteries sure don't like the cold," she observed with a smile. Tom looked up, offering a weak smile in return. "Hello, Mrs. Carey. How have you been?" "Getting by, dear. And you?" Tom gestured at his truck, then ruefully at himself. "Been better." Mrs. Carey paused, concern evident in her eyes. "Tom, you need to move on. You can't let one person's actions define you." She was well aware of Tom's situation. "Come inside and warm up with some coffee. It's too chilly to be out here." Despite the pounding headache from his previous night's indulgence, the allure of hot coffee in the Careys' snug home was tempting. The Careys, both around 65, had refused to let retirement slow them down. Finding idleness not to their taste, they had taken up trucking together, adding a unique chapter to their long-shared journey. Mr. Carey's health had taken a downturn recently, which meant he and his wife Linda had been homebound for the last week. Given their close bond, Ben didn't want Linda driving the truck on her own, yet they still had several delivery commitments with a local grain supplier for the year. Over a steaming cup of coffee, as the trio engaged in light conversation, Ben hesitantly posed a question to Tom. "Would you consider helping Linda on the road for a couple of weeks?" Without much delay, the following day saw Tom and Linda meticulously inspecting the semi-truck, ensuring its roadworthiness. Gradually, Tom started appreciating Linda's presence. Their shared drives became filled with laughter and tales of their past. However, a week into their trips, Linda received distressing news about Ben's deteriorating health and decided she needed to be by his side. Tom, wanting to help, assured Linda he'd complete the outstanding deliveries. During one of the final runs, Tom found himself navigating a treacherous highway in the midst of a storm. Maybe it was the fury of the storm or the emotional whirlwind within him, but loneliness engulfed him once more. Thoughts of visiting a liquor store began to surface, tempting him to seek refuge in a bottle, but he remembered his commitment to complete the delivery and geared up for the next leg of the journey after loading the trailer. Tom was just about 5 miles from entering town when he spotted a silhouette on the side of the road. The setting was unusual, a remote stretch of highway in the bitter cold and still veiled in pre-dawn darkness. Drawing closer, he realized it was a woman, possibly a teenager, with a small child tucked closely behind her. Alarmed, he quickly braked and pulled over. "What on earth are you doing out here? Especially with a child in this cold and at this hour?" Tom exclaimed. She merely shrugged in response, her eyes reflecting desperation and uncertainty. "Are you heading into town?" Tom asked. "Please get in." The child, visibly trembling from the cold, clung tightly to the woman as they boarded the truck. Tom's instinct was to simply drop them off wherever they wanted and move on, but he couldn't ignore the nagging wonder of their odd presence on that deserted highway. Gathering himself, he probed further. "Is there a place nearby you were coming from? Is everything okay?" She hesitated before answering. "Truthfully, we don't have a place to call home, and barely any money. Do you know of any safe places in town where we could find shelter?" Trying to catch a clearer look at her in the dim light, Tom noted the evident signs of fatigue and strain on her face. She appeared to be much younger than he initially thought. Tom felt a tug at his heartstrings. Unsure of where exactly he could take them at such an early hour, he began to think of the best course of action. Taking a brief glance at the young boy huddled against the woman, who looked about 5 years old, Tom checked the time on his watch. Driving without a word, he soon pulled up in front of his house. Hesitating momentarily, he reached into his pocket, extracting the keys and handing them to the woman. "That's my place," he said, pointing. "You can stay there. I'll return after 6. The inside should be warm, but if it isn't, there's wood by the stove to light it up. There's food in the kitchen, although I can't vouch for its condition, and I'm sorry for the state of the place. Haven't cleaned in a while." Without further explanation, he passed the keys to the visibly surprised woman and drove off to the designated parking area for his truck. For reasons he couldn't explain, he never once dwelled on the idea that he might have just handed his home over to potential thieves. The day's tasks kept him occupied, and his usual routine would have seen him heading to the liquor store. But today, with the memory of his morning encounter, he felt a mix of apprehension and anticipation. Along with his customary half-liter of whiskey, he added some candies to his purchase, unsure if the mother and child would still be at his home when he returned. Pulling up to his house, Tom noticed lights glowing from inside, a sight so unusual for him that it tugged at his heart. Approaching cautiously, he peered through the window. Inside, he saw a transformed living area. What was once cluttered and unkempt now appeared orderly and clean. On the couch, nestled under a blanket, the young woman was reading aloud to the boy, both engrossed in the story. Tears welled up in Tom's eyes. Memories of a time when he and Emma had dreamed of a family, of children's laughter echoing in their home, rushed back. He recalled the day he'd excitedly picked out a collection of children's books from a neighborhood store, imagining Emma reading them aloud to their future kids. But those very books had been left untouched, lying forgotten in a corner after Emma's departure. He had often thought of getting rid of them, but something inside held him back, perhaps a flicker of hope or a painful remnant of dreams unfulfilled. A warm, inviting smell drifted from the house, reminding Tom of days when the kitchen was alive with the sound and scent of home-cooked dishes. Memories of shared meals and laughter flooded back. Looking down at the bottle of whiskey in his grasp, a pang of guilt hit him. He decided in that moment to hide it, quickly pushing it deep into the snow beside his doorstep. Upon stepping inside, Tom's gaze met that of the young woman, who immediately stood up. Her cheeks glowed a delicate shade of pink, accentuating her natural beauty. "Hello?" she said, her voice slightly shaky. "We didn't want to intrude too much, but Johnny and I cleaned up a bit. I've also made dinner for us." Tom's surprise was evident. That morning, he had seen her as a distressed stranger in need. Now, under the soft glow of the indoor lights, he could truly see how stunningly beautiful she was. Her eyes sparkled with gratitude and a hint of mischief, and her posture radiated grace. "Well, I'd love me some dinner with such a cool company. My stomach's been grumbling," Tom admitted with a chuckle. As she set the table, Tom knelt down beside the young boy, offering a friendly smile. "Hey there, I'm Tom. And you are?" The boy, with a hint of shyness, replied, "Johnny." With a playful wink, Tom reached into his pocket and produced a candy bar. "For you, Johnny," he said. "Seems like kids can never resist these, huh?" With eyes wide, Johnny glanced at the woman, seemingly asking for permission. She smiled and nodded, prompting him to gratefully accept the candy. Tom settled into his chair, the inviting aroma from the pot making his mouth water. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the scent. When he had cleared his plate, he looked up to find the young woman watching him with an expectant expression. "That was exceptional. It's been ages since I tasted something so homey," he complimented. Her face lit up. "I'm glad you liked it. It's a small way to thank you for your generosity." But then her demeanor changed, a hint of sadness clouding her eyes. "I think it might be best if we leave soon. We don't want to overstay," she whispered. Tom looked puzzled. "Do you have some place you need to be?" She shook her head. "No specific place in mind." Tom hesitated, searching for the right words. "You know, it's been lonely here. If you need a place to rest, you're welcome to stay longer." She looked towards Johnny, who was barely keeping his eyes open. Tom, sensing her concern, gently offered, "Let me prepare a bed for Johnny. He seems worn out." Her name was Scarlett. She appeared from the dimly lit hallway after settling Johnny to sleep and gracefully sat opposite Tom. Noticing the silence between them, Tom took the initiative, pouring warm tea into 2 cups. As he handed one to her, their hands brushed and she looked up, revealing a pair of intense, crystal blue eyes. "I don't want you to get the wrong idea about what happened," she started, her voice shaky but sincere. "Life's been tough. I was in college when I met him. I was young and made some quick decisions. I wish I'd chosen differently, but then I wouldn't have Johnny." Coming home with a baby wasn't easy. My mom was caught up in a new relationship with a younger guy, and she wasn't supportive. Things got worse when her boyfriend showed an interest in me. I pushed him away, but when my mom found out, she blamed me. That's how we ended up getting kicked out." Tom sipped his tea, processing her story. The warm liquid was a stark contrast to the cold, hard truth Scarlett had just shared. "Scarlett," Tom began, his voice steady, "you're welcome to stay here, at least until we find a more permanent solution. The house has been too silent for too long. I'll do what I can to help, maybe even look into local resources or job opportunities for you." In just a week's time, Tom's nightly ritual of drinking felt like a chapter from a past life. The once empty rooms of his house echoed with the laughter and chatter of their new occupants. Instead of nursing a bottle, he now found himself sprawled on the living room floor with Johnny. Together, they assembled puzzles, painted pictures, and built makeshift structures from old cardboard boxes. The Careys had known Tom for years, but they had never seen him this lively and joyous. In recent times, they had grown accustomed to his somber demeanor, always concerned about him. When Tom knocked on their door with an apple pie in his hands, they were taken aback, not just by his gesture, but also by the light in his eyes. "I brought you folks a pie. Scarlett made it," he announced with a proud grin. Mrs. Carey, taken by surprise, remarked, "This is unexpected, Tom. But what's the occasion?" Tom chuckled. "No special occasion, I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" Mr. Carey inquired, genuinely puzzled. "Well, you gave me a task, and through that, I met Scarlett and Johnny. You indirectly brought happiness back into my life." Linda, ever the observant one, had been silently watching the change in Tom over the past week. She couldn't contain her happiness and gave Tom a warm hug. "I'm just so glad to see you like this again, Tom," she whispered. Every corner of Tom's house, once cold and silent, now echoed with the soft murmurs of shared stories and laughter. Each room had been transformed, showing signs of life and care. The kitchen, previously unused except for reheating leftovers or pouring drinks, now wafted with enticing smells of home-cooked meals. The living room, where dust had settled on chairs and tables, was now the center of their shared activities, be it Johnny's craft projects, their evening reading sessions, or their weekend movie marathons. But amidst this newfound joy, a quiet thought lingered in the back of Tom's mind. Every night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't help but wonder how long this newfound happiness would last. He had yearned for this warmth and connection for so long, but now that he had it, the fear of losing it all overshadowed his joy at times. During a routine stop at a store after work, Tom was greeted by the familiar cashier, her smile wider than usual. "She's back, you know," she said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Confused, Tom asked, "Who are you talking about?" "Saw her here just a few hours ago." A cold wave washed over him. His mind raced to Scarlett and Johnny. Without another word, Tom rushed home. Barging into his house, he found Emma stretched out on a sofa, trying to look enticing. Her eyes, however, betrayed a hint of bitterness. His gaze darted around the room. Scarlett and Johnny were nowhere in sight. "Where are they?" he demanded, voice trembling with a mix of worry and anger. Emma feigned surprise. "Why the cold welcome? Missed me?" Tom's patience wore thin. In 2 steps, he stood over her, looming. "Scarlett and Johnny, where are they?" Her bravado faltered as she shrieked. "How should I know? Maybe they've scampered off to wherever they came from." Tom clenched his jaw, pointing towards the door. "By the time I return, you better be gone." Emma's confident smirk vanished. Once she'd been the center of Tom's world. Now he barely acknowledged her presence. The realization stung. Tom didn't pause to hear Emma's sigh, exiting in haste. Each passing minute felt like an hour. The dim evening light made it harder for Tom to think of where Scarlett and Johnny could have gone. He hoped the Careys would have an inkling. Arriving at the Careys' doorstep, he quickly explained the situation. Linda didn't hesitate, immediately fetching the keys to their old pickup truck. "Please be careful, Tom, and let us know if you need anything," she urged. The chilling night wind whipped against Tom's face as he drove around town. It wasn't a big place, and there weren't many spots they could have sought refuge. An idea sparked in his mind: the truck stop at the edge of town. Pulling into the parking lot, relief washed over him as he spotted Scarlett and Johnny's silhouettes through the diner's fogged-up windows. Entering, he strode to their booth, feeling Johnny's cold fingers signaling they hadn't been there long. The weight of the situation bore down on him. "Why did you leave? Didn't you think about what could have happened to Johnny in this cold?" He was more worried than angry. Tears streamed down Scarlett's face. "Emma told me about you two. I didn't want to come between that. I thought I was intruding." Tom sighed, ordering them warm drinks. "It's not what you think. Emma and I are in the past." The journey home was quiet, but the tension was palpable. Tom felt a certainty growing within him. He knew he had to convey his feelings to Scarlett soon, to ask her and Johnny to stay. The ordeal had only clarified his priorities and the depth of his feelings. Walking into the house, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Tom noticed a shift in Emma's posture. The arrogant confidence she had earlier was replaced with desperation. Nodding at Scarlett, he motioned her to take Johnny to his room, wanting to shield them from the inevitable confrontation. Before Tom could even voice his thoughts, Emma's voice cracked. "Tom, I made a mistake. Let's try again." She began to spill the beans about the dire situation she found herself in. Gone was the lavish lifestyle she had hoped for. Her so-called millionaire boyfriend was a sham, buried in debt and living a lie. Emma herself was now penniless, working a dead-end job. The truth was evident in her eyes. The glamour she once chased after had evaporated, leaving her with nothing but regret. "Why come back? After what you did?" Tom asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Her voice quivered. "I see now how wrong I was. I want to make things right." Tom's gaze was steady. "I moved on, Emma. I found a way to mend the broken pieces you left behind." She tried to appeal to his emotions. "Tom, we can start over, just like old times." Tom was resolute. "That's not possible." When she realized her pleas were falling on deaf ears, Emma became defensive. She reminded him of their legal bond, stating that she had every right to stay in the house as his wife. With a vindictive glint in her eye, she gestured towards Scarlett and Johnny, implying that she could force them out of the home. Tom's jaw tightened. He had come a long way since Emma's departure, and he wasn't about to let her threats disrupt the newfound happiness he had discovered. Tom was blindsided by Emma's sudden vindictiveness. Her transformation from a pleading wife to a spiteful adversary was startling. "This house stands because of my hard work, Emma. Do you really want to drag this through the mud?" he questioned, trying to hold on to his temper. Emma's true motives were clear as day. It wasn't just about the house. It was about pride and envy. Seeing Scarlett and Johnny, a symbol of what could have been, fueled her resentment. With a malicious smirk, she threatened, "I'll drag you through court, Tom. I'll spin tales of how you abused me, and we both know how fast rumors spread in this town." The mere idea of his name being tarnished terrified Tom. He knew the close-knit community all too well. Once a rumor started, it was near impossible to clear one's name. He needed to tread carefully, keeping Scarlett and Johnny's well-being at the forefront. He glanced at the family photos on the mantel, the antique clock Emma had insisted on buying during one of their vacations, and the faded rug that had witnessed countless arguments and sweet moments between them. Each item told the story of their shared history, but they were chapters he was ready to close. Silence stretched between them for a few tense moments before he finally spoke up, his voice tinged with both sadness and determination. "You know what, Emma? Maybe you're right. Maybe you do have some claim to this place. But these walls, this house, it's filled with memories I want to leave behind. Memories of us, of what we once were." Emma, taken aback by this revelation, watched him trying to gauge if he was being sincere. Tom continued, "I found peace in the sense of family with Scarlett and Johnny. I won't let the past jeopardize that. If moving away means securing a happy future for them and avoiding unnecessary conflicts with you, then so be it." Emma's eyes widened, having expected a fight. She hadn't anticipated him willingly giving up the house. Tom felt lighter having made the decision. The idea of starting fresh, building a new home filled with love, laughter, and memories untainted by past heartaches felt right. With Scarlett and Johnny by his side, he envisioned a warm, cozy space where they could thrive and grow together as a family. Emma felt a strange mix of victory and emptiness. She had come prepared for a battle, expecting Tom's resistance, but his peaceful surrender took the wind out of her sails. The house seemed colder, emptier, even with him still in it, as if its very soul was leaving with Tom. Tom took a brief moment to sit in the car outside the Careys' home, drawing in a deep breath. He always felt a sense of calm when he visited them. They had been his pillars of strength in his darkest times, always ready with a listening ear or some advice. Upon entering their cozy living room, he handed over the car keys, explaining his situation. The Careys listened intently, concern evident in their eyes. They had grown fond of Scarlett and Johnny and were saddened to hear the tumultuous situation. After Tom shared his decision to move, Ben, a stout man with a silver beard, patted him on the back. "You're a brave soul, Tom. Not many would make such a sacrifice." Linda, with her gentle eyes, added, "It's a shame. That house was perfect for you and the little family you were building." Tom nodded. "I just want what's best for Scarlett and Johnny." As he left, Linda whispered something into Ben's ear. They both nodded, a glint of mischief and determination in their eyes. They had seen much in their years, and they had a plan, one that might just offer Tom a brighter future. After a restless night, Emma stretched and scanned the room. She noticed Tom and Scarlett engrossed in packing up their belongings. A short while later, as the aroma of breakfast wafted through the house, there was a distinctive knock on the door. It was the Careys, Mr. and Mrs., bearing a tray of freshly made pancakes. Ben wandered in, leaning against Linda for support. Without warmth, they acknowledged Linda, who sat awkwardly in the living room, and made their way to the kitchen. The previously animated conversation died down, making way for a hushed silence before Ben broke it. "Tom," Ben began with a serious tone, "why don't you and your new family come stay with us for a bit? At least until you sort everything out." Emma, trying to make herself invisible, heard every word. Disbelief painted her face. 2 days on, Emma observed from behind the curtains as Tom and young Johnny worked together, shoveling the thick blanket of snow from the pathway in front of the Careys' house. As the days went by, Tom immersed himself in his work. At home, Scarlett took on the role of caregiver, tending to Ben and now Linda, who had fallen ill. In the meantime, Emma lived in solitude at her own house. Consumed by feelings of despair and resentment, her mood darkened with each passing day. Initially, she dismissed the recurring stomach pains, thinking they were just bouts of stress or indigestion. However, as the pain persisted, she sought medical advice. A few weeks later, the grim diagnosis came. She had a stomach tumor. Emma's condition deteriorated quickly, and in her isolation, there was no one to witness her decline. Then, one chilly morning, the blaring siren of an ambulance broke the neighborhood's usual tranquility. It came to a halt in front of Emma's house. Scarlett, looking out from her window, watched with concern as paramedics rushed inside. After what felt like an eternity, the medical team emerged, and Scarlett hurried over, seeking information from one of the doctors. Once the ambulance had departed, Scarlett hesitated for a moment before approaching Emma's door. She knocked gently, but there was no answer. Trying the handle, she found it unlocked and cautiously entered. Inside, the room was dimly lit, revealing Emma, frail and weak, lying in her bed. Her once fiery demeanor was now replaced by the pallor of sickness, and every breath seemed an effort. Scarlett fetched a glass of water from the kitchen, then returned and sat by Emma's bedside, offering it to her. They spoke softly, with Scarlett inquiring if Emma's family, especially her mother, knew of her condition. Emma responded with a hint of bitterness, sharing that her mother had cut ties and wanted nothing to do with her. Moved by Emma's desolate state, Scarlett, in a surprising turn of compassion, took it upon herself to care for her former adversary. Over the next 3 months, she became a beacon of support. tending to Emma's needs and ensuring she wasn't alone in her most vulnerable moments. Tom, too, put aside past grievances and often drove Emma to her medical appointments. It was a test of character for both Tom and Scarlett, and in those final months, they showed immense compassion towards Emma, who ultimately succumbed to her illness. After the somber proceedings of the funeral, Tom stepped back into his familiar home. Each corner, each piece of furniture now held memories not just of his life, but also of Emma. A wave of melancholy washed over him, and he realized that despite everything, he genuinely felt a deep sorrow for Emma. Her life and the choices she made taught him a valuable lesson. The importance of compassion, forgiveness, and the fleeting nature of life itself. It was a lesson he vowed to pass on to those he held dear. As winter's cold embrace gave way to the warmth and bloom of spring, the house echoed with new beginnings. Johnny and Tom, brushes in hand, brought a fresh coat of paint to the walls, symbolizing a fresh start. Scarlett, her growing belly making her movements a tad slower, still managed to infuse love into every meal she cooked and every room she tidied up. The Careys, Linda and Ben, became an indispensable part of their lives. Though they had never been blessed with children of their own, they showered Tom and Scarlett with the affection and guidance only parents could provide. The bonds forged in challenging times had made them a close-knit family, proving that family wasn't just about blood, but about the love and care shared between